Good evening, my dear friends. I welcome you all to the Hindu and the Businessline editorial analysis on June 28, 2022. The Wimbledon is known for its grass courts, and this year the Wimbledon is being played nowadays. So many aspirations are going to be fulfilled on this Wimbledon match tournament which is happening. But the unfortunate thing about the Wimbledon is that Russia and Belarus are being banned. So we will miss Medvedev. So this is not a thing which should be done because the Wimbledon or the tennis is a very professional game which must not be taken into in the midst of political considerations or war between countries. We have already discussed on these topics a few days back in the editorial analysis. The professional game of tennis should be left as so without interfering with the tennis game's political aspirations or the political troubles should not hinder the Wimbledon's professionalism was discussed. And then the next is that the Grand Court at the Wimbledon is celebrating its centenary, that is 100 years. It is now having a retractable roof. The Grand Court was established in the year 1922 and it is the symbolic of the Wimbledon tennis matches. Another feature which is striking in this Wimbledon tournament is Roger Federer is missing. However, we have Djokovic who is trying his hard to win a Grand Slam or the first tournament out of the 4 Grand Slam events. He was banned for the Australian tournament and he could not win the title in the French Open. So this is his chance of winning the Wimbledon tournament this time. Another striking feature in this Wimbledon season is Rafael Nadal, who, if he wins the present match, he will be having the Grand Slam title, which is winning all the 4 events in a year. That is US Open, the Australian Open, the French Open, and the Wimbledon. So these are some of the aspirations, the ship of aspirations which is going to unfold in the Wimbledon courts and especially the Grand Court which is celebrating its centenary year. Then there is the issue of Israel's coalition, 8-party coalition crumbling and Naftali Bennett's cabinet losing its streak and falling. Naftali Bennett took charge of the Israeli Prime Minister a year before, incorporating within his coalition even an Arab party. The 8-party coalition has succeeded in overthrowing Netanyahu government. However, the 1 year on it is crumbling is a very strange event. So this is a kind of thing which Israel must consider. There are clashes of interest. The Arab interest and the Jews' interest are always clashing in the Israeli politics. Once Henry Kissinger said, Israel doesn't need a foreign policy. It has to sort out its diplomatic ties within the country. So Israel is in a state of crisis. The present foreign minister, Yasser Lapid, is in charge of the active prime ministership status. Israel is going for polls in November or October 2022. So the trial of Israelis to forge an alternative government devoid of Netanyahu's over Judaism aspects or over religious aspects is not looking so much ground with the fall of this coalition. The coalition fell with the one Jew minister exiting the government, saying the extension of Israeli laws to West Bank is not acceptable. The Arab which is supporting the only one Arab party which is supporting the Israeli government, is the vindication of a very congenial coalition which Naphtali Bennett formed and will ever be remembered. This is the year in which we as Indians are celebrating 30 years of cooperation with Israel. So, we need a robust and stable government in Israel, is the underpinning of this aspect. Then the article by Subbarao, the former governor of Reserve Bank, points the FRBM Act is being breached while freebies are being offered to public by the several governments, especially Punjab government. The freebies are those which are the social safety nets being offered by governments in state governments in India to win the political elections. Subbarao states that the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act constrains most of the states to maintain a fiscal discipline in the state so that the state does not run into the situation in which Sri Lanka is now today. A host of state ministers have complained to the Prime Minister that there is a state of emergency like Sri Lanka coming in some of the states in India. The Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act states some kind of restrictions on the management of the finances by the states. There is restriction on the borrowing, and the borrowings should not go for the freebies. What the states are doing is that they are taking the money from the exchequer and financing the freebies. And when the financing of the freebies happens from the exchequer, the obligation is the guarantee by the state government on the future revenues in the form of tax revenues, and the borrowings are being funded to just finance the debt burden. When this debt burden is increasing day and day, the lure of winning the elections is just holding them back from exercising the fiscal discipline, the fiscal profligacy. Profligacy is wayward movement of money by the government, state governments. This has to be arrested. There are some two provisions in the constitution where the states have to ask for the center's permission before they expend the finances of the state and from the center, and this constitutional provision has to be properly used by the central government. The second is that the president can declare a financial emergency if the state finances are going out of control. The Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act also should be amended to bring more responsibilities on the states to declare the sources of finance, that is, the contingent liabilities in their budgets and the macroeconomic performance of these freebies. The next in Businessline is supporting the stopping of the GST compensation to the states. The GST compensation to the states has run its course. The 5 years time since July 1, 2017 was made by the center to compensate the states for any shortfalls in the revenue of the target of 14% growth in GST revenues year on year. However, it can be seen that even before the introduction of GST, the 8% growth was only recorded all over India by several governments over the year on year growth of tax revenues. The moral hazard with regard to the GST compensation is that some states, especially Punjab, Himachal Pradesh and Karnataka, are just depending on this GST compensation. They are most of the states like Karnataka and Punjab. For them, 20% of the total GST revenues is from this compensation alone. The key editorial points that the state revenues out of GST have grown. Some 24 states have recorded a GST revenue of more than 20%, and some 14 states have recorded a GST revenue of more than 30%. Now it's time to stop the GST compensation since this moral hazard is just nagging the finances. In future, some more. Now the pandemic induced slowdown has prompted states to ask for the compensation for some more years. The GST Council meeting, which is happening on Tuesday, today and tomorrow, is the 45th GST Council meeting, is going to take a decision on this GST compensation extension. Hence, the editorial is again and again repeatedly pointing the bad effects of extending this GST compensation. It is time for GST compensation to go out of the decks. If the pandemic hit years have just raked up the demand for compensation to the states for some more years, it will in future some other emergency may arise and the compensation will go on continue. Who is ultimately suffering the effect of this? The ultimate consumers who are paying a heavy price on the GST compensation sets. So this is a time. There is a time when the economy is growing at 7.75%, and this is the time to stop this GST compensation. This is the key article of the Businessline. Here, and another article which contradicts this editorial article is from the Gulati Institute of Taxation, that is GIFT, Finance and Taxation. Gulati Institute of Finance and Taxation states that there are several reasons why GST compensation should stay. One is that the most of the states' economies are in bad shape and in tatters, hence requires the GST compensation to be continued. And the growth of the GST revenues which is being projected is having some loopholes, like the growth is being calculated from the years when the pandemic was hit, and the growth will definitely show, the GST revenue growth will definitely show a very high increase, which is misleading, and therefore the GST compensation should continue for another 2 or 3 years. And then there is the problem that technical glitches initially hindered the GST filings and compliance cost burden on the businessmen, and some fake invoices by the businessmen also just inhibited the GST revenue collection of the states. That has to be taken into consideration. And then there is the problem of just having the growth set at 14%. Only some states will demand GST compensation revenues, because most of the states will have more than 14% of the GST revenue growth in the coming year. So for other states, it is the kind of comfort which is being just placed by the system of GST compensation. So the Gulati Institute of Finance and Taxation says that a compensation formula should be worked out, and the time for which the GST compensation should extend should be deliberated upon scientifically, and this GST compensation should stay. It counters the editorial Businessline and saying that GST compensation should stay. Friends, thank you for your patient hearing. Thank you for your kind cooperation. Bye.